I just can't say how much I've learned here. To hear all the stories, not just of the women fighters, but also the experiences that we've all had, are so similar, whether we're the little guy or the big guy, and also, the learning things that we've heard, like, information on managing, on promoting, on, how to handle fighters, on judging. I mean, we got some great information on judging and what it takes to actually see that action in the ring and be able to tell when things are happening. I mean, it's very informative for myself because I'm in the business. I'm finding a lot of good information here that I want to take home with me. But, and of course, always great to see everybody with the WBC and all the women fighters. It's amazing.
Did you get in the ring and fought?
Yes.
And
Yes. So I did. I boxed professionally. When I fought, they didn't have WBC Women's Championships. So it's been a minute. I retired in 2006. And that's when I had my last fight. And they were just starting to put some belts around, Jackie Nava, Ana Maria Torres, Mariana Juarez, those ladies in Mexico. And they were coming out a little bit outside of Mexico. So for the women's game, it was kind of new. They were starting to be a few titles, but I retired. It was a little bit too close for me to get a chance to fight for a WBC championship, which I hated that. But I did win the WIBF and the WIBA championships, which, back then they only had those kind of belts for women. So, a lot of people a lot of women fighters that had that same experience. So, I don't feel any less, but I wish I could have gotten the green belt. But I did win a mini one yesterday, so I'm really happy about that, and I put it over my shoulder. So I got a WBC belt, and it was just about this big. Super happy though.
what took you to the ring, the gym? I'm sorry.
All women get asked that question.
Yeah.
And I keep telling people, I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, how did I wind up here? I don't know how that happened. I got into boxing really late. I was 36 with my pro debut. So to become a champion, that makes, that was almost incomprehensible. So, but I just was so determined. Speaking of the present and the past, that Christy Martin just got off stage where she was interviewed and she was saying, they were asking her, what do you think about the women's game today? And she's like, I just wish I was 30. And me too. I'm like, man, the opportunities that they have now is so much greater. I mean, I just wish I could do it again, but I can't. So, but this is a great time to be a woman prize fighter. I mean, Jake Paul is signing all these women. There's a lot going on in the women's game. I mean, people don't understand, but back in the day, when I boxed, and even before then, a lot of people thought, women weren't very skilled fighters and that kind of thing. But you got to understand, we learned to fight in the ring. We weren't trained very well. There wasn't a lot of women's amateur boxing. I think right before I went pro, they had the first women's world championships, like literally not long before that. And I tried to get amateur fights, and I was already, at that point, USA Boxing, wouldn't let you fight past 34, and I was already 34, so I was trying to get matches, and I couldn't even get a match. So I went straight into the pros, and a lot of women did back then. I mean, they would like, if you want to fight, just go to the pros. It's the only time you'll get a match, so there were so few back then. So, to say that they weren't televised and they weren't really appreciated, there was a reason behind that. It's just because we just didn't get a chance to fight. We didn't get a chance to spar. We had to deal with, sparring men is great. I mean, I hear a lot of people say, oh, she spars men. And I'm just going to say, like, the first half of my career, I sparred men. The second half, I sparred only women. And it was way better, competitive sparring with a woman in the ring than with the man. It's just, the women's game is a smart game. Women sparring women, that's where the competition is. So now they're sparring, their chances to fight, good amateur programs. Yeah. So, I mean, the game has changed a lot. And, now promoters are taking notice and women are making money. And it's just, it's amazing to see the road opening up. And, most of that you can attribute to a lot to the WBC, because when they brought the big boys in, before that, we only got the women's championships, but they brought the big game in. So, a big salute to the WBC for, giving us the opportunities. And, it's a good time to be a woman fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the rules are made based on medical studies.
I agree, though. However, look at who actually dies in the ring. Very few women. We've seen some things, but just yesterday, Mauricio Sulaimán was saying, he thinks that men should fight 2-minute rounds. And, they may, who knows if the WBC goes to, men fighting now 2-minute rounds. It's safer, but there's more action, and it's, I've never been a proponent of the 3-minute round for women. I was like, why? For what? If you go to any pro boxing show, they usually say, oh, the women's fight was the best. That's because of those 2-minute rounds. You know what I'm saying? I think, I personally support it. I always have. And I would love to see men have to suck it up and fight the pace that we do. The women fight a different pace, As someone fighting, the last half of my career, I only had title fights, world title fights. So, fighting a 10-round fight, it's a completely different strategy than a 4-rounder. And I always said, no way I want to fight a 4-round fight again. Forget that. You can even see like some of the pros that have gone back into the amateurs for the Olympics, they don't win because the Olympians, the amateurs, they fight a different pace. They got 3-round fights. There's something to really study about the action in the ring compared to the time in the ring. You need to have more action in some of the fights, and I think, I hate, the guys aren't going to like it, but I would love to see men fight 2-minute rounds. 12 rounds, okay, 10 rounds for women. How many rounds does it take to prove a point? So we'll see where that goes, but I bet, I have a funny feeling the WBC may lead the way because they definitely carry way more weight when it comes to how they, manage the rules and the formulations that they use to make the fights safe.
Yeah.
So, I have to agree with him on that, and I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, doctors say that
Yeah.
it should be
Right.
less rounds, shorter
Right.
rounds. And one of the concerns today also is the rounds of sparring. Sparring is a fight.
Right.
They wear headgear, bigger gloves, but it's still a fight.
Right. Right.
If you think that some boxer sometimes spars 2 or 3 times a week, that's a lot of punches.
Do I'm seeing a big trend right now. As a person of boxing, I've been in boxing 25 years. Fighters don't get dementia in the fights. They get dementia in the gym. And I've seen, I have a rule. I train a lot of fighters. We never spar 2 days back to back. Even when I was in camp, I didn't do that. And I'm seeing a trend now, especially with a lot of people that are training young kids. We're talking 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, sparring 8 rounds. They're fighting a minute and a half for 3 rounds. Why would you spar these kids? And they spar every day. And they spar again and again and again. They'll spar the day before a fight. I just, even USA Boxing knows that sparring, they changed some issues on headgears and not headgears because they found that when people wear headgear, when fighters wear headgear, they take more chances because they feel the security of the headgear. But that doesn't really change the impact. Headgears are for cuts. They're not for concussions.
Exactly.
Even in the sport of football now, they're changing a lot of rules,
Exactly.
Kickoff rules. They're finding that clash, at the kickoff is like the most dangerous. We really have to consider, is the sport worth dying for, just in the gym? Save it for the fight. Work on the floor and work technical, and get the sparring in. The sparring's there, for all of the practice, but there's a lot more to boxing than sparring. So, I completely support less sparring in the gym. If a fighter works hard on the floor and, even on the mitts, you can, like when I work pads, I simulate counterpunching drills and, inside fighting drills and, footwork and angles. There's no need to just, spar only that kind of thing. You know, like they need to get in there and work on the floor. It makes a big difference in their game, and it keeps them safe. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is your best memory in the ring, in your boxing career?
Oh, my career was very. I mean, to me, I look back and it's kind of a comedy show. Pardon me, but I think my best, of course, winning the world title was the greatest thing. But you know, the older I get, and as much as I wished I was young again and could do it, the entire journey was so good. You know, the entire journey was so good. You know, every time that I surprised myself and did that thing that I really wanted to do, and you know, that dream came true, whether it was even just getting off that punch and that combination I wanted, or if it was, you know, like a victory or an experience. I mean, you know, I remember I fought at one time. I went to the New Daisy Theater in Memphis, Tennessee, Elvistown, and I had this fight, and it was, you know, Tanya Harding was there because she was getting into boxing, and the ring was like beat up. There were holes in the canvas. There was like one light coming down into the center of the ring. You know, they were like, pardon me, they were like, I'm just clearing my throat. Excuse me. There were guys, you know, drinking like cheap bar drinks, smoking cigars, wearing hats in the audience, you know, really halfway paying attention to the fights. And even though that was a weird experience, but, and I, you know, knocked this girl out in the first round, but, you know, that was a certain type of fight, but the nostalgia of that experience, I felt like an old timer that could go back and say, oh yeah, I had this fight. I mean, that's just such a fond memory because, you know, I felt like this is the old history of boxing, and it was like a really interesting experience to me. So even though that wouldn't seem like anybody's greatest memory, it's one that I really, like, I talk about a lot because it was such an interesting experience. You know, the world of boxing is just so unique. You know, there's every kind of personality, you know, all demographics, financially, you know, racially, politically. I mean, I told somebody just the other day, I'm like, world peace through boxing. I mean, if we could just all fight it out, there would be no war. You know, I just wish we could do that. But, you know, so many stories to tell. And it's hard to find a favorite spot, even though, of course, the title meant everything, you know, but, you know, even, you know, some of my own fighters, you know, going through their victories and seeing them grow, it's hard to pinpoint one thing when you've got so many great experiences. You know, the journey itself is what I'm coming to enjoy.
Yeah. Did you know when was going to be your last fight?
No, I really didn't. Because once I became champion, my trainer decided he was finished training me. But I was almost 42 years old. I set a world record at that point. Back then, people weren't really fighting. You know, it was like me and George Foreman in the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest world champions. So he just kind of threw his hands up, and he was finished with me. And it was a very sad. I wasn't ready. I was just like, I'm just now getting started. But you know, on the other side, you know, it made me reinvent myself in boxing. I said, you know, I want to be in boxing. So it made me decide I'm going to, you know, own a gym. I'm going to train people. I'm going to promote shows. You know, I've managed a few fighters. So it's just given me a chance to experience the whole dynamic of boxing in a way that a lot of people won't try all the things. And I just have tried all the things. And, you know, I've got a great gym in Atlanta. You know, I've got a collegiate team, the Georgia Tech boxing team, and the college boxing is a new thing that's really on the grow, and that's a great experience. I can't even say, you know, how rewarding that is. And then my own amateurs and some great pros that I've had, and, you know, shows, and, you know, there's just a lot there that has been a really rewarding experience for me. So, I mean, hard to pinpoint a single thing.
So life after boxing, still boxing.
That's right. No need to leave. You know, there's a lot to do, and they need us. So we need to get on that, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things to do inside and outside of the ring.
Right.
There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And what has boxing given you?
A very full life. I mean, I've done things and I've been places with boxing that I just never would have gone, and I never would have done had I not been in boxing. I mean, it's been really, I'm going to die in boxing. It's been such a rewarding life. Even the things that are, the hard times, the struggles, the fight to push through, and just being in the game, like you cannot be a fighter and still be fighting in boxing, and especially as a woman. So, I just love what I do, and it's where I'm going to stay. So as long as I can.
Yeah.
When I have breath, I'll breathe boxing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as much as boxing gives, has it taken away anything?
Oh, it takes away a lot. It takes away your life. I mean, I've been married to boxing. I'm like, when I haven't had a date in 25 years, I think I can say I gave something to boxing. But yeah, I mean, it's, you've heard people getting bitten by the bug. I mean, boxing can consume you, but I guess, if you think about any sport and any athlete that puts their life into a sport, it's going to be the dominating force in their life. It's taking time away from my family, time away from my experience. I have very little personal life. But then again, as they say, if you do something that you love for a living, it's not like you really work. Mm-hmm. So, it takes, it gives, That's what it does.
And if there's such a thing as an afterlife or as a, would you be a boxer again if you had the choice?
If I had another life, I would always be a boxer. I do believe in an afterlife, and I think it'll be great to see all the fighters there. So, but yeah, I think this would be always my choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this imaginary question, you decide to be a boxer again.
Yes.
What would you tell to the young Terri who wants to get into boxing? What would you advise her?
Oh.
I mean, you know a lot.
Right.
Living a whole life in boxing.
Right.
Now, what would you advise your little self in the next life to be aware of or look for?
Just to be aware of the outside. I guess any athlete can probably tell the same story. There's, being a top athlete, there are always obstacles. So keep your blinders on. Stay focused. Don't let anything distract you from what your goal is. And that's really been my best position in boxing and in anything I do in life is I never take no for an answer. What do you mean you can't? Why? Well, let's see if we can. So keep those blinders on, push forward. Where people think there's not a way, there's always a way. There's always a way to do that thing, whatever it might be. Yeah. So stay on the course. Don't let life distract you. And also, keep the family close because whether it's your boxing family or your family, your children, your parents, the people that love you are the ones that are going to support you the most. And I mean, not that mine did in the beginning. They were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, my daughter had to come to my first world title fight. I fought Maria Ana Rosa. She's passed away now, which is really sad. And she was inducted last year. But she, I fought her in Madrid. And that's when my daughter told me finally, "Mama, now I understand. I understand why you do this." But, it might take a little convincing. In fact, we all have to convince family why we box. But, definitely stay the course. And they'll jump on when they see that you've got a real mission and a purpose and that there's a reward at the end of the tunnel and there's a life within the ropes.
Yeah.
There's a life in there.
Yeah. There may or may not be a next life, Terri.
Right.
But right now, I believe you're sharing that to the kids that you have in your gym.
Right. Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what life is all about.
And they know I love them. They know that I am there for them. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it's a great life. Boxing is a great life. I mean, some fighters. I think there are fighters that can only be fighters, and that's okay. it takes a lot to be able to step outside of the ropes and say what next, and to say that you can't be that fighter anymore. It's hard to let go of that, and it's that way for all athletes. I remember Deion Sanders. He played football and baseball. He had a World Series ring. He had, he had a football. Here I go. He had the. I'm so sorry. I'm having a brain thing. he won, the World Series in baseball, and then he had the. Can you help me? This is my ADHD taking in. He won the football. USA football. I hope this isn't going to be on there. NFL, yeah. So he had World Series and he had the World Championship football, and he had both of the rings. And he said, "What am I going to do now? I mean, at the top, I've won the top of the bowl. Of everything I ever wanted to do, I've won everything. And now I don't know what to do. And he was depressed after that. I remember hearing his story." He just didn't know what to do beyond that. And some people do that. So, I mean, I feel really grateful that I've been able to see outside of that. But I mean, that can be a struggle. So, I mean, everybody in the game of any kind of sport, or even if they're, movies, actors, I mean, we all have our dreams. And when we reach the pinnacle of our dreams, to try to find another place to go, that's like the wealth of knowledge that you can experience, as a human being, to be able to take different spaces and places and that kind of thing. And, I really hope that for everybody. And, the afterlife, for me, I'll always be that fighter. But, I just hope at the end of the day I can say I fought for more than just myself. I fought for a purpose and for a reason, and those kind of things. And now I forgot your question. I'm so sorry, Jose, because the NFL thing threw me off. But all of my fighters are probably going to laugh when they see this. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's Terri." So, but yeah, I mean, I just can't say, what it's like to be sitting here with you, with the WBC at this convention, to have the honor to speak. I'm grateful for what I've experienced, and, I will take it into that next life, and, there's a life in and outside of those ropes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a good speaker off the cuff, because that's all I got. Sorry
Just to finish, we live in a social media world.
Yeah.
So please tell us your social media.
Yeah.
If you have a webpage for your gym.
Yes. Okay. And it's definitely lacking because I'm the social media guy, which, one of these days I'll hire somebody for all of the little odds and ends. But our social media, my gym is in Atlanta, Georgia. It's Buckhead Fight Club. We're like Atlanta's only underground fight club. We've got 25,000 square foot of fun. So we literally are the biggest gym in Atlanta. And, again, we've got kids, college boxing, we've got white collar boxing, we've got fitness programs, we've got pros, amateurs, all the things. And I'm gonna put a little shout out to my little champ getting ready to fight Isidro Cortez, because he's gonna be a WBC champion one day. So put that out there for him. He's gonna love that. And then, our social media is Buckhead Fight Club on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and whatever I can do to keep those things rolling, because we're a little slow, but we do have some stuff from the summit up there already today. So check us out. Come by the gym if you're in Atlanta. Fighters from out of state, if you're coming through, you need a place to train. We got all the floor space you need. We're ready for guests. So come on down there.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great interview.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope you still enjoy the rest of the day of information and sisterhood.
Yes, I will. It's going to be great. Hall of Fame tomorrow, you guys. Check us out. I mean, the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame needs support from the boxing community. So, you guys check us out. I'm going to be posting some things. We've got some great new people being inducted. Great fighters, great women of the sport Saturday, and I look forward to that as well. And I'm so glad the WBC has gotten involved. We love this partnership.